Folks, it is official. Joe Biden is out of the race. He has declared he will not be running for president of the United States anymore. This is historic, shocking news, really unprecedented in American history. This breaking news is brought to you by our friends over at Policy Genius. Head over to policygenius.com/Shapiro. Get a free life insurance quote. See how much you could save. Coming up today on The Ben Shapiro Show, of course, we're going to be getting into everything related to this. First, of course, Joe Biden finally has called it quits. But, as you know, the left's assault on America is far from over. The election is pivotal. You need the truth now more than ever, and the updates are coming fast and furious. You need to be with us every single moment. I mean, I'm recording this at like 1:40 in the morning. You need us every single moment. The Daily Wire gives you the uncensored truth every single day. We cannot do it without you. Go to dailywire.com right now. Use code FIGHT for 47% off your annual membership. Join us as we fight the left and build the future. Alrighty, folks. So, Joe Biden is officially out of the race. He announced it via Twitter, of all places, Eastern time, about 1:46 Eastern time. He announced it via Twitter, which I guess Elon wins, since that's the way he decided to do it. I thought that if Joe Biden was going to do this, he would have announced that he had a presser or some sort of big statement that he was going to give from the Oval Office or from the White House somewhere, and then he was going to do that at a preset time later in the evening. That is not how he chose to do it. Instead, he released the following letter. Here's the text of the letter. Again, just a screenshot released via Twitter. Quote, "My fellow Americans, over the past 3.5 years, we have made great progress as a nation. Today, America has the strongest economy in the world. We've made historic investments in rebuilding our nation, in lowering prescription drug costs for seniors, and in expanding affordable health care to a record number of Americans. We've provided critically needed care to 1 million veterans exposed to toxic substances, passed the first gun safety law in 30 years, appointed the first African-American woman to the Supreme Court." By the way, only he's allowed to mention that. If you mention that, you're a racist. "And passed the most significant climate legislation in the history of the world." Interesting. "America has never been better positioned to lead than we are today." I feel like if that were true, he would not be dropping out of the race. He wouldn't have like a 32% approval rating. He continues, "I know none of this could have been done without you, the American people. Together, we overcame a once-in-a-century pandemic and the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. We've protected and preserved our democracy, and we've revitalized and strengthened our alliances around the world." Like every element of this, of course, is untrue, which is the real reason he is dropping out, as we'll get to in a moment. "It has been the greatest honor of my life to serve as your president, and while it has been my intention to seek re-election, I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term. I will speak to the nation later this week in more detail about my decision. For now, let me express my deepest gratitude to all those who have worked so hard to see me re-elected. I want to thank Vice President Kamala Harris for being an extraordinary partner in all this work, and let me express my heartfelt appreciation to the American people for the faith and trust you have placed in me. I believe today what I always have. There's nothing America can't do when we do it together. We just have to remember we are the United States of America and a boogeyman." Okay, now, there are many things about this message that are rather shocking. Number one, he says that he is stepping away from his candidacy, but not from the presidency. So why? I mean, that's the obvious question. If you are in a state of senility, you need to step away from the presidency because we're about to launch into one of the most dangerous periods in American history. The rest of the world knows that Joe Biden is a lame duck president. They know that at very best, his successor might be able to take over for another term. But they also know that he's totally senile and not in control of his faculties at this point. I mean, when Joe Biden wakes up and someone tells him he's no longer running for president, he's going to be quite shocked about that, I would assume. I mean, by the way, he could wake up tomorrow and undo this, I would assume also, since he's been vacillating on this, as we now know, for weeks. But this means a couple of big things, obviously. It means that Kamala Harris, as we'll see in a moment, is likely to be the Democratic presidential nominee for president. It also means that the primary system just doesn't exist anymore. That if you decide, the party decides that a candidate is running so weak against the opposition that they can't possibly win, that if they can put the screws to that person sufficiently, that person will step aside. Joe Biden in this letter never makes mention of why he's dropping out. He never makes mention of why, right? He doesn't say he's doing it because he's senile, even though that's clearly the case. Instead, all he says is that it's in the best interest of his party and the country for him to stand down and focus on fulfilling his duties as president. So he's saying the quiet part out loud. The real reason he's dropping out is because he's losing to Donald Trump. That basically Donald Trump clocked him so hard in the debate, and frankly, he fell down on the job so poorly in the debate, that ended his presidential candidacy. So he's not dropping out because he won't be able to fulfill a second term. He in his own mind believes that he absolutely would be able to fulfill a second term. He's dropping out because he is losing and losing really, really badly. So Joe Biden is dropping out because he's losing really, really badly, but all of his friends are saying that he's a hero for dropping out, which is unbelievably stupid. It doesn't make you a hero to drop out of a race that you are losing when everyone forces you out of the race. But you know what is not stupid? Getting life insurance. It is actually very, very important for you to get life insurance. Getting life insurance will give you peace of mind, knowing if something were to happen to you, your family could cover their expenses while getting back on their feet. Policy Genius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It makes choosing the right policy for your family easy and quick. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies starting at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. Some options are 100% online and let you avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policy Genius has licensed award-winning agents and technology that make it easy to compare life insurance quotes from America's top insurers and find the lowest price. Their team of licensed experts is on hand to help you through the process. Even if you already have a life insurance policy through work, it might not offer enough protection for your family's needs. It might not follow you if you leave your job. Policy Genius works for you, not the insurance companies, which means they don't have the incentive to recommend one insurer over another. Save time, save money, provide your family with financial safety net using Policy Genius. Head on over to policygenius.com/Shapiro. Get your free life insurance quotes. See how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/Shapiro. So the initial speculation, the minute that this came out, was that there was something weird about the letter in that Joe Biden actually had not endorsed Kamala Harris for the presidency. Then, just a few minutes later, he tweeted that he, in fact, would endorse her for the presidency. It was about half an hour later. My fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination and to focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's been the best decision I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be the nominee of our party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Trump. Let's do this. It's pretty humiliating for him because he has to admit that Kamala Harris, who's wildly unpopular and terrible at her job, actually has a better shot at beating Trump than he does. It also must be sort of humiliating because we know that Jill really does not like Kamala Harris at all. For her part, Kamala Harris put out a statement. Her statement reads, quote, on behalf of the American people, I thank Joe Biden for his extraordinary leadership as President of the United States and for his decades of service to our country. His remarkable legacy of accomplishment is unmatched in modern American history, surpassing the legacy of many presidents who have served 2 terms in office. So now we're going to get the kissery of Joe Biden. Right? This was the trade. The trade was, we'll have a DNC where we pay homage to the wonders of Joe Biden. And then it's not Joe Biden's fault if the Democratic Party goes down in flames. It's whoever gets appointed next to run against Donald Trump. That is the bargain. And presumably there'll be a very, very well-apportioned presidential library in Rehoboth Beach or something. Kamala Harris continues, it is a profound honor to serve as his vice president. I am deeply grateful to the president, Dr. Biden, and the entire Biden family. I first came to know President Biden through his son, Beau. We were friends from our days working together as attorneys general of our home states. As we worked together, Beau would tell me stories about his dad, the kind of father and the kind of man he was. And the qualities Beau revered in his father are the same qualities, the same values I've seen every single day in Joe's leadership as president. His honesty and integrity, his big heart and commitment to his faith and his family, his love of our country and the American people. Okay, let's be real about this. None of this is true. Okay, Joe Biden is a self-interested politician. He has been since he was 29 years old and when he won his first Senate race and immediately started using his senatorial power in Delaware to direct corrupt activities to the benefit of his family. Again, as far as the idea that he is honest and filled with integrity, this is going to be a serious question for Kamala Harris. We'll get to many of the attack lines on Kamala Harris in a little bit, but one of the big ones is going to be Kamala knew that he was senile for literally 2 years and just weeks ago was talking about how the man was reciting Virgil in Latin backwards, upside down, behind closed doors. So she was complicit in the lying to the American people. And by the way, today she could 25th Amendment him. Today, she could lead the way to get the cabinet to get rid of Joe Biden as president because, again, he is senile. She is not doing this, which means it is all political for these people. She says, with this selfless and patriotic act, President Biden is doing what he has done throughout his life, putting the American people and our country above everything else. Again, that is a really weird way to read. He's losing a race, and so now he's dropping out. That's a very strange way to read that. He's running a crappy race. He's really bad at this, and he's senile. But he's not dropping. We can't say that he should drop from the race because he's senile, because then he'd also have to drop from the presidency. So instead, we're going to say that he's undergoing a massive sacrifice by stepping out of the race. The real question should be, why is he incapable of defending his record? If the problem is not the senility, why isn't he capable of defending his record? Pretty good question, right? The answer is, it's the senility. And realistically, it's not even the senility. Realistically, it is just the fact that Joe Biden is getting whomped in the polls right now by Donald Trump. In the immediate lead up to him stepping out, polling showed Trump winning Virginia and the Rust Belt. The Real Clear Politics projected Electoral College showing had him winning 325 Electoral College votes against Joe Biden's 213. That is, in fact, a blowout. There's a poll that came out in the hours before Joe Biden decided to step out, showing that Joe Biden was getting clobbered in Michigan by fully 7 points. According to Politico, Joe Biden was far outspending Donald Trump even before the debate, and it was having no impact at all. So the real reason, again, he's getting out is because he's losing. And so they've decided they're going to pull their starting pitcher and they're going to put in a reliever. And the reliever is apparently Kamala Harris. She says, I'm honored to have the president's endorsement. My intention is to earn and win this nomination. No, it isn't. You're not going to earn anything. She's never earned anything. Are you kidding me? Kamala Harris is going to earn and win. Like, really? Kamala Harris? Are you serious? She's never earned or won anything. Like, she was legitimately handed her original posts in California state government because she was sleeping with Willie Brown. And then he backed her in her race for San Francisco DA. And then she lucked into her job as Attorney General of the state. And then from there, she really lucked into her job as senator. And then she ran the worst presidential campaign, like one of the worst of all time. And then she proceeded to luck into her job as vice president, earn and win the nomination. She's not earning and winning anything. She's inheriting it. Joe Biden is trying to transfer over his delegates to her. And his money, by the way, because it turns out that giant $100 million stash for the Biden-Harris campaign still can be used by, wait for it, Kamala Harris. She says, over the past year, I've traveled across the country talking with Americans about the clear choice in this momentous election. That is what I will continue to do in the days and weeks ahead. I will do everything in my power to unite the Democratic Party and unite our nation to defeat Donald Trump and his extreme Project 2025 agenda. By the way, that is your first hint that she is going to be running a very bad race. If her opener is Project 2025, that does not scare people because Donald Trump doesn't even know what it is, and you don't know what it is, and no one knows what it is. It is a 922-page program from the Heritage Foundation that no one alive has read, ever or will. If that is the bleeding point of the spear for her, good luck. She says, we have 107 days until Election Day. Together we will fight, and together we will win. Well, we'll find out. Meanwhile, oddly enough, the Clintons immediately swiveled behind Kamala Harris. But you know who didn't? The Obamas. So Bill Clinton put out a statement on behalf of both himself and Hillary Clinton. And this was presumably to take Hillary Clinton off the table as a possible kind of last-minute dark horse candidate who would jump into some sort of open convention scenario. And they put out a statement supportive of Biden and also of Kamala Harris. It said, President Biden has capped his extraordinary career of service with the presidency that has lifted America out of an unprecedented pandemic, created millions of new jobs, blah, 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 blah. We join millions of Americans in thanking President Biden for all he has accomplished, standing up for America time and again, with his North Star always being what's best for the country. Which country? Like China or whichever country is paying his family. Well, we are honored to join the president in endorsing Vice President Harris, and we'll do whatever we can to support her. And then they just start ripping on Donald Trump. So the Clintons, they are backing Kamala Harris. That's not exactly a pure relationship, but let me tell you something that is pure. Pure talk. Oh, yes. There's only one cell phone company that gives you free premium access to the media you actually care about. It's Pure Talk. This might be the best offer Pure Talk has ever issued. Listen to this. When you switch your cell phone service to Pure Talk, on a qualifying plan, you'll get a free 1-year insider subscription to Daily Wire Plus. That is a solid deal. Take advantage of unlimited talk, unlimited text, 15 gigs of data, and mobile hotspot on America's most dependable 5G network for just $35 a month. And you also get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus. Daily Wire Plus Insider Plan gets you access to our entire library of movies, series, and documentaries, including Lady Ballers, What is a Woman, Mr. Bertram, Run, Hide, Fight, and more. Plus, you get all our daily shows uncensored, ad-free. The only way you can get this special offer is by heading on over to puretalk.com/Shapiro. I've been telling you to stop overpaying for your cell phone plan for a very long time. If you haven't made the switch over to Pure Talk yet, now would be the magic moment. Go to puretalk.com/Shapiro today, switch to a qualifying plan, get 1 year free of Daily Wire Plus Insider. Meanwhile, Barack Obama put out a statement, and the entire statement is about the magic of Joe Biden. Now, let's be clear. Joe Biden and Barack Obama hate each other with the fiery passion of 1,000 burning suns. Barack Obama correctly believes that Joe Biden is an idiot. Barack Obama correctly believes that Joe Biden is a failure. And he believes that Joe Biden is only president because he rode Barack Obama's coattails. And Joe Biden knows that Barack Obama believes all these things. And so one of the big problems here is that Obama and his team were putting serious pressure on Joe Biden to drop out. And specifically because Joe hates Barack and Barack hates Joe, Joe lasted longer than he might otherwise have. Because they do not get along. Barack Obama sees himself as the creator of Joe Biden, and he's embarrassed by that because Joe Biden is an embarrassing person. So Barack Obama puts out a statement, quote, 16 years ago, when I began my search for vice president, I knew about Joe's remarkable career in public service. What I came to admire even more was his character, his deep empathy, his hard-earned resilience, his fundamental decency and belief that everyone counts. And he goes on and on and on along these lines, paragraph after paragraph. And then he gets to the part that's really interesting. He says, we will be navigating uncharted waters in the day ahead. But I have extraordinary confidence the leaders of our party will be able to create a process from which an outstanding nominee emerges. So you notice what they're not doing right there. The thing they are not doing is endorsing Kamala Harris. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not behind the scenes endorsing Kamala Harris. There are a lot of people who are speculating out there that the reason they're not endorsing Kamala is because they think they're going to jet set in Michelle at the last minute and Michelle will be the candidate. That would be a smart move for Democrats. I really don't think that's going to happen. Michelle has very little interest in running for higher office again. She had enough of it when Barack was president. Beyond that, Barack and Kamala are very close. You'll recall, years ago, Barack Obama said she was the hottest AG in the country. And then he had to apologize for that. And then he made one of the final calls to Joe Biden to convince Joe Biden to take Kamala Harris as the vice president. So again, I think it's possible to overread what Obama is doing here, to read it as a sort of initiation of a battle against Kamala Harris. I don't think that's what's going to happen here. So what happens next? According to the Washington Post, there are two paths for replacing him at the top of the ticket. The first is this virtual convention. So the virtual convention, which really is all of the delegates just voting, that's supposed to happen between August 1st and August 7th. That is the reason there was a big rush to get Joe Biden out of the race. The hope is that the virtual convention will lock it up for Kamala before you get to the open convention. An open convention would be everybody arrives at the convention, which is just happening August 19th in Chicago. It'll be like 1968 all over again if it's an open convention. And nobody knows exactly who the nominee will be. And then there are riots outside and all of the rest. So they're trying to forestall that by ramming Kamala Harris through very, very early. So again, he's now endorsed Vice President Harris. That doesn't mean that his delegates automatically go to her, but heavy advisory role, right? And again, Bill Clinton has now endorsed, Hillary Clinton has now endorsed, Barack Obama, he will end up endorsing in the end. Again, I think that all of the happy talk about the possibility of other people jumping in, highly unlikely. Josh Shapiro, a possible rival, who's the governor of Pennsylvania, he's already endorsed Kamala Harris. Gavin Newsom, by proxy, has effectively endorsed Kamala Harris at this point. Gretchen Whitmer has apparently already told NBC News she has no intent on jumping in. There are no other possible rivals. So that means it's Kamala. It's Kamala. So what does that actually mean for the race? Well, it means a bunch of things. One, this is now a totally new race. It's a totally new race because, again, the entire Trump campaign, as you would, was directed against Joe Biden. And that meant that the campaign had Joe Biden on the ropes on the basis of policy. And then after the debate, Joe Biden started to physically fall apart and mentally fall apart in front of everybody. And so the entire campaign swiveled to focus on the fact that Joe Biden was not capable of fulfilling the job. Now that Joe Biden is out, that means that the Trump campaign is going to have to come up with a bunch of other angles. Right? They're going to need a totally new playbook. What are the best lines of attack on Kamala Harris? Also, the entire dynamic of the race shifts. Because, as I've said, this entire election cycle, if this race is a referendum on Donald Trump, he is going to lose. If the race is a referendum on the Democratic candidate, who was Joe Biden, was going to lose. It very clearly became a referendum on Joe Biden as soon as he went up there on the debate stage and made a mess of himself. As soon as he pooped his depends on the debate stage, it was basically over for Joe Biden because all you could think about when you thought about the presidential race was Joe Biden. Well, in the last week, obviously, a lot of focus has shifted back to Donald Trump because of the assassination attempt, because of the RNC. And now Joe Biden is out. And so the Democrats have replaced their biggest liability in Joe Biden. Now, that doesn't mean that Kamala Harris is popular. She is very, very not popular. The polls that do exist between Harris and Trump demonstrate that Trump still has the advantage. Those polls have high levels of variability. There's some polls showing Trump up as much as 11 points on Kamala Harris. And then there are other polls that show them basically dead even. Kamala is a very unpopular vice president. Her approval rating is somewhere in the low 30s. Nate Silver has a pretty good rundown. The case against Kamala Harris and the case for Kamala Harris. The case against her is that she has a really bad track record. She's run a bunch of bad campaigns, going all the way back to her original senatorial campaign. She spent way too much money. She was able to survive that because she was running against Loretta Sanchez. She effectively had no rival in that race. And so she was able to walk into the office. But she ran a very bad campaign. Then she ran a very, very bad presidential campaign. So can she run a very, very good presidential campaign this time? That's a big problem for her. Nate Silver also makes the point that there's been a lot of talk about Kamala Harris driving out higher numbers of black voters. But as he says, Kamala Harris might have a larger electoral college popular vote gap than Biden if she does worse among white voters, but better among voters of color. In other words, if she ends up trading a bunch of voters who are black and Hispanic for white people in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, then she could actually lose worse than Biden in those particular areas. She also inherits all the policies of the administration. She has been the representative of many of those policies. The fact that there has been this massive cover-up of Joe Biden's health and that she's been complicit in that is going to be a line of attack against her. Most people do not like her very much. She's going to inherit Joe Biden's campaign staff, presumably. The upside is that she's alive, right? That's the big upside for the Democrats. She is not Joe Biden. So you've already seen them start to retail their line of attack against Donald Trump. Their line of attack is that she is 59 and he is 78. The age issue is now flipped. So it's now about Donald Trump. Now, do most people believe that Donald Trump is in anything remotely like the shape that Joe Biden was? Of course not. Nobody thinks that. However, that is going to be the case they make, is that we dumped our old unpopular candidate. You guys are still running your old unpopular candidate. That is why she will do better than Joe Biden would. Also worth noting, all the Democratic Senate candidates in this race, up until very recently, were doing much, much better than Joe Biden, which sort of suggests that the problem might be Biden, not necessarily that the problem is Kamala Harris. Her disapproval rating is approximately 50%. Biden's was like 57%. She also has a pretty high floor, as Nate Silver points out. This is the case for her. A lot of normie Dems are going to come back. The fundraisers will open up again. All the money will start flowing once again. And again, the Republicans are going to have to come up with some sort of actual attack line against Kamala Harris, which is harder than it is with Joe Biden, because while she's the vice president, she's not actually the president. You can see that the sort of depressed voter turnout that Republicans were counting on for Democrats, that may start to dissipate as well. Now, again, does Donald Trump still have the advantage? Absolutely. Yes, he does. He clearly has the advantage right now in this race. It's still a time of turmoil. Kamala hasn't been formally even named the nominee at this point. With that said, it's a very different race. And what this means, if you're a Republican, is whatever you thought was going to happen, you need to go out and work 3 to 4 times as hard to make sure that it actually does, in fact, happen. The race has changed. In an instant, it has really, really changed. Act Blue raked in nearly $50 million in the 7 hours after Harris's campaign launch. That is a massive amount of money. The donors immediately came out off the bench and started throwing money at Kamala Harris's campaign. Well, with Kamala Harris now the front runner for the Democratic nomination, the question of Israel is, of course, still in the news because she is not good on Israel. In fact, Israel is maybe the only country I've ever heard of that is continually called upon to fight for its own existence. In a situation like this, it's especially important to know who your friends are. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews and its hundreds of thousands of Christian and Jewish supporters are such friends. For more than 40 years, the fellowship has been working to alleviate poverty and provide security both in Israel and in Jewish communities around the world. They've helped hundreds of thousands of Jews from around the world make aliyah to their biblical homeland. That's why I've partnered with the fellowship. Both in times of crisis and every day, they are there on the ground efficiently and effectively delivering aid when people need it most. Please consider making a life-saving donation today. Thanks to a generous IFCJ supporter, your gift will be matched, doubling your impact in the Holy Land. To give to IFCJ, visit benforthefellowship.org. That's benforthefellowship.org. God bless and thank you, benforthefellowship.org. If past is prologue and the Biden administration has been terrible for Israel, a Kamala Harris administration would be much worse. Well, listen, they need your help over there. The International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, IFCJ.org. So what exactly are the attack lines going to be on Kamala Harris? Well, J.D. Vance, who's the new vice presidential nominee for the Republicans, he retailed one of those attack lines in the lead up to Joe Biden stepping out of the race. He says, what exactly have you ever done, Kamala Harris? This is a good question.
Kamala Harris said something to the effect that I have no loyalty to this country. Well, I don't know, Kamala. I did serve in the United States Marine Corps and build a business. What the hell have you done other than collect a check?
Now, again, it's not going to be J.D. Vance debating Kamala Harris now. Now it's going to be Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris. And that debate is going to be fascinating. It's going to be fascinating, number one, because Kamala Harris, she actually can hold herself together during a debate. You'll recall that early on, she actually did quite well in her debate against Joe Biden in the original primary race. And then she sort of held her own with Mike Pence. I mean, Mike Pence, I think, did much better than she did, but I thought that she wasn't absolutely awful. She's not going to die on the stage the way that Joe Biden did. Now, I do think that Donald Trump should prepare for a patented Kamala Harris random word salad, right? She serves word salads of all varieties. She's got like a kale word salad. She's got like a Caesar word salad. She's got all sorts of, she's got a Greek word salad, like all sorts of wonderful types of world. It's basically supplantation over there in terms of her verbiage. And so I would be very happy if Donald Trump would reuse the line he used against Joe Biden. He said, I have no idea what you said at the end of that sentence, and I don't think you do either. He can do that, except he can just say, I have no idea what she just said at the end of that sentence, and I don't think she does either, because that's still true. She is going to, be completely incoherent. So there are a few things that are really good attack lines against Kamala Harris. One, obviously, is the fact that she is a liar. She is a liar. She lied about Joe Biden's health. She lied about it for months. She lied about it for years. She went out there and she said over and over and over again that he was totally fine and wonderful and everything was cool and great. And it was a lie. And it turns out the American people don't like people who lie about that sort of thing. So that is attack line number one. Attack line number two is she's been fully involved, according to her, in all the Biden administration's bad policies. So she owns it. She doesn't get to pretend that she has nothing to do with that. She owns all of it. Most prominently, for example, the border policy. Joe Biden put her in charge of the border, and then she proceeded to go down to the Northern Triangle and declare that unless the economy of the Northern Triangle was healed, there was nothing they could do. And then she did an interview with Lester Holt in which she lied and said that she'd been down to the border and then was called out on it in real time. Here's your reminder. Here's what that sounded like.
There's one other topic I wanted to talk to you about, but let me just quickly put a button.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
I'm here in Guatemala today. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
And then, of course, Kamala Harris is very famously awkward. And she's really, really awkward and difficult to watch, really difficult to watch. I mean, we've been mocking Kamala Harris's mannerisms for years at this point. And the random laughter, where she just starts getting uncomfortable. It's super random, not particularly likable, sort of Hillary Clinton on steroids. She makes Hillary Clinton look charming. Now, the difference is, by the time we got to 2016, Hillary Clinton had been in the American public eye since 1992. Okay, so that is a 24-year period in which Hillary Clinton was in the public eye. Kamala Harris, I don't even know how many Americans know who Kamala Harris is. I mean, seriously, most Americans can't name the vice president. So Republicans are going to have to do a good job of characterizing her. The good news is there's plenty of tape of her acting like a nut job. Here, for example, is Kamala Harris talking about coconuts famously.
You think you just fell out of a coconut tree? You exist in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
Or if you don't like that, here's some of that patented Kamala Harris word salad.
We all watched the television coverage of just yesterday. That's on top of everything else that we know and don't know yet, based on what we've just been able to see. And because we've seen it or not doesn't mean it hasn't happened, but just limit it to what we have seen.
And of course, there is her radically weird attempt to laugh off any difficult question.
Do you have plans to visit the border?
Not today, but I have before, and I'm sure I will again.
Right? All of this is going to come to the fore. Right? If you go back to her presidential campaign, she said she wanted to get rid of private health care insurance, for example. On the Middle East, she's a complete mess. When it comes to domestic policy, she has made many, many radical statements. She literally attempted to bail out rioters in 2020. Right? All of these things are going to come back. So an attempt to paint her as some sort of moderate is going to be difficult, which is precisely why she's going to attempt to pick somebody who's perceived as a moderate as her vice presidential pick. Well, I'm not sure you would have bet on this particular political race because it's all insane, but betting with BetOnline is a ton of fun. Beyond traditional sports, BetOnline gives you the option to bet on political events, like who will take Joe Biden's place after he is no longer in the presidential race, or who will be Kamala Harris's VP. Or if you're a diehard sports fan, BetOnline makes sports betting more accessible and convenient than ever before. With just a few clicks, you can place bets on your favorite teams or events from the comfort of your own home. BetOnline prides themselves on their higher-than-average betting limits of up to $25,000. You can increase your wagering amounts by contacting their player services desk by phone or email. So, while you're watching your favorite team or the news on upcoming elections, why not spice things up with a friendly wager over at BetOnline? Go to betonline.ag to place your bets today. Use promo code BEN for a 50% sign-up bonus of up to $250. That's betonline.ag. Use promo code BEN. BetOnline, the options are endless. Think how much money you would have made, by the way, if you had actually bet on Kamala Harris being the presidential nominee this year. A lot of bets out there because a lot of craziness is out there happening. Check them out at betonline.ag. Again, that is betonline.ag. Remember, now that she's the nominee, she's going to get to pick the person she wants to run with, presumably around the Democratic convention. Some of the people who have been mentioned, Andy Beshear, who's the governor of Kentucky, I think that would be an interesting pick, especially because he will almost certainly then be replaced by a Republican in the state of Kentucky. right? The lieutenant governor of Kentucky right now, Jacqueline Coleman, she is a Democrat, but that's not for long, right? Andy Beshear is kind of 1-1 in Kentucky. And so that means the next election cycle, that state turns entirely red. Kentucky is a very red state. She could theoretically pick Gavin Newsom in California. I think that's very unlikely. A double California ticket makes no sense. And Gavin Newsom is really, really radical. Just last week, he signed into law a law that said that school districts are not allowed to force teachers to report to parents if kids are questioning their gender in the classroom, which is totally insane. I mean, that is a form of child abuse, and Gavin Newsom signed that into law. So I don't think it'll be Gavin Newsom. The name that's been mentioned most often is Josh Shapiro, again, the governor of Pennsylvania. That makes a lot of sense politically because, of course, he is a very moderate Democrat governor from Pennsylvania, first term, extremely popular. The idea would be to take Pennsylvania off the table for President Trump. But as many people are noting, Democratic Party's got a serious anti-Semitism problem. They are not going to nominate a Jew for the number 2. They're just not going to do it. I'm hearing that from people who literally are members of Congress inside the Democratic Party. Okay, that is not like some sort of weird, outlandish accusation by me. CNN's John King said the exact same thing yesterday. So again, I really doubt it's going to be Josh Shapiro. Gretchen Whitmer is a possibility. The upside on Gretchen Whitmer selection is that Gretchen Whitmer is, of course, a pretty popular governor of Michigan. Presumably, Michigan then starts to fall back into the Democratic column. It also exacerbates the gender divide. So one of the big fascinating stats about this election is that the Democrats are running well with single women, and Republicans are running really well with men, both single and married. And so you could see Kamala Harris try to double down on abortion and an all-female ticket by going with Gretchen Whitmer. I think it'd be a stupid move. I think she needs to diversify away from that. I think she probably will look for a white male. It's very similar to 2008, actually. In 2008, Barack Obama was specifically looking for a white male in order to diversify away from the fact that he was a black man. And now, in 2024, you would assume that she might try to diversify away from both black and woman and seek a white man in this job. So you might see her pick somebody like J.B. Pritzker from Illinois. That's a possibility. You might see her pick one of the senators who has not been mentioned so far, kind of go off the board there. I don't think it's going to matter all that much. In the end, it's going to be Kamala Harris, and it's going to be up to Republicans to try to define Kamala Harris. Now, the left-wing response to all of this has been absolutely fascinating. So it is absolutely amazing that apparently Democrats were completely blindsided inside the Biden administration by Joe Biden dropping out. Like, that's kind of an amazing thing. We'll get to more on that in just 1 second. First, Joe Biden finally realized that all good things, or in the case of his presidency, all terrible things, must come to an end. But your chance to get a Daily Wire Plus annual membership for 47% off is still here, and it is essential. This election is pivotal for America's future. The truth has never been more important. The Daily Wire exists to give you the unvarnished, uncensored truth. We can't do that without your support. Join the fight. Go to dailywire.com. Use code FIGHT for 47% off your new annual membership. No one knows what's going to happen next. Like, literally no one. But when it does, we will be there. Join us as we fight the left and build the future. Dailywire.com, code FIGHT, 47% off annual memberships. Become a member today. Okay, meanwhile, one of the things that's so astonishing about the way that Joe Biden dropped out here is that apparently his staff had no idea he was going to drop out. They spent the weekend saying he absolutely 100% was not going to drop out. In fact, Politico says, quote, Biden's announcement stunned White House and campaign aides who up until this afternoon were insisting he'd stay in the race. We're all finding out by tweet, said one Dem. None of us understand what's happening. And that's definitely a great way to run an administration. And again, the reality is that everybody knew that he had to go, but at the same time, nobody was willing to bet on the idea that he was going to go. I mean, as of this weekend, Tara Palmieri, right, a reporter, writes for a variety of publications, she said that Hunter Biden was the one making the call, and he was totally dug in.
It shook a lot of Dems to see, because they don't get most people don't get a lot of access to Joe Biden, and seeing him speak that way, they were like, whoa. This is, to some,
he seemed unhinged.
A lot of people use that word. And yeah, so to your point, like every single meeting he has now, I mean, this is the argument for Joe Biden. He's just not going to be able to survive this, because every single meeting he has, it is going to be every single person that wants to get him out of the race is going to like either record it or like leak it. And it could be really bad.
Okay. But the people who are still with him, Jill, Hunter, right?
Yep.
And Hunter is dug in, I'm told.
That is my understanding.
I mean, first of all, that's amazing that Hunter was the one who was theoretically having impact on this. James Clyburn spent the weekend before Joe Biden announced he was dropping out saying that he supported Joe Biden.
Joe Biden has been through a process along with Kamala Harris, and they have received over 14 million votes to be our standard bearers. That process lends itself well to us getting to the convention as a unified party. And that's what we need to do. I support Joe Biden. He is still in this race. He will be our nominee if he stays in the race. And I think all of us should look for ways to coalesce around that candidacy. Now, I have said, when I've been asked, what will it take for you to change your mind? It will take him changing his mind.
Okay, that was like less than 4 hours before Joe Biden dropped out of the race. Meanwhile, Democratic National Committee co-chair Cedric Richmond on Sunday morning literally said that Joe Biden was staying in the race.
I want to be crystal clear. He's made a decision, and that decision is to accept the nomination and run for re-election, win re-election. And I think that there are those out there that need to hear it again, that he made a decision. He's going to be the candidate. He's going to be the next president. And now it's time to focus on the threat that Donald Trump poses and what the extreme agenda is on the other side.
I mean, it is quite fascinating that this White House is so inconsistent and so crazy that they had let no one know that they were going to drop out until Joe Biden put it out via Twitter. He still has not made a public statement with his face on it announcing something as monumental as, I am the nominee and I am not going to take the nomination. That's an insane thing. The reaction inside the Democratic Party has been almost entirely positive, but of course there's some very bitter clingers, you might say, in the Biden team. Ron Klain, who is Biden's chief of staff, said, quote, now that the donors and electeds have pushed out the only candidate who has ever beaten Trump, it's time to end the political fantasy games and unite behind the only veteran of a national campaign, our outstanding VP, Kamala Harris. Let's get real and win in November. Again, she's a very bad candidate. And frankly, I'm looking forward to them trying this with Kamala Harris. Like, if you had to pick as a Republican, who would you want to replace Joe Biden on the ticket if Joe Biden had to be replaced as a Republican? My answer would be Kamala Harris. Certainly wouldn't be, a Josh Shapiro or Gretchen Whitmer. Senator John Fetterman, he said people pushed out an honorable man, loving father, and great president before an absolute sleazeball like Bob Menendez. Congratulations. Fact check true on that one. Meanwhile, the Democratic press, they were immediately attempting to trot out the narrative that he was a hero. Joe Biden is a hero for dropping out of a race he was losing. That is an amazing statement. It truly is. And it really shows very little respect to Democratic primary voters. There were 14 million Democratic primary voters who voted for Joe Biden. Now, to be fair, there was no real rival to him in the primaries, but that, again, was the fault of the Democratic Party, which lied to you for years, saying that he was perfectly sentient, perfectly with it, perfectly well. That is the reason they crowded everyone out of the primaries. They literally rigged the primaries in order to prevent anyone from presenting opposition to Biden, and only when Joe Biden made the single-handedly idiotic move of accelerating the debate to June and then insisting on doing it in the first place, only at that point did everybody suddenly come out of the woodwork and say, this guy's got to go. Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, he put out a statement saying Joe Biden has not only been a great president, nope, and a great legislative leader, nope, but he's a truly amazing human being, also nope. His decision, of course, was not easy. He once again put the country, his party, our future first. Today shows you are a true patriot and a great American. Again, I'm just wondering how it is that dropping out of a race that you are losing shows that you're a great patriot. Like, really, that's your mark? It just shows you know how to read a poll occasionally, is what it actually shows. Nancy Pelosi, who, the fingerprints on the dagger between Joe Biden's shoulder blades, the fingerprints belong to one Nancy Pelosi. She put out a statement also saying, quote, President Joe Biden is a patriotic American who has always put our country first. His legacy of vision, values, and leadership make him one of the most consequential presidents in American history. With love and gratitude to President Biden for always believing in the promise of America and giving people the opportunity to reach their fulfillment, God blessed America with Joe Biden's greatness and goodness, which is why I stabbed him directly in the back and tossed his prone body over a cliff. Again, all of the lefties who are currently celebrating him are all people who wanted him to go, which is hilarious. They're all people who are instrumental in his downfall. And they're like, oh my God, I'm so glad that now that Julius Caesar is lying on the floor in a puddle of his own blood, and, I'm one of the people who shoved the knife in him. Now I'm really, what a hero he was, truly. Really taking one for the team over there. Ezra Klein of the New York Times doing the same routine. This is what America First looks like when it's a lived ethos rather than a mask for narcissism and ambition. Joe Biden is not narcissistic or ambitious. That's weird. That's weird. John Favreau, again, Team Obama. Again, Team Obama, their fingerprints all over the knife. John Favreau says a courageous and selfless decision. The president did what he's done for the last 4 years. He listened to the American people and put the country's interests ahead of his own. Or alternatively, he got the picture that you guys were going to go nuts on him if he lost to Donald Trump. And so you forced him from the race. And now he's going to be able to blame whatever happens next on Kamala Harris and you guys. So enjoy. Donald Trump, for his part, put out a statement that is very Trumpian. Quote, crooked Joe Biden was not fit to run for president and is certainly not fit to serve and never was. He only attained the position of president by lies, fake news, and not leaving his basement. All those around him, including his doctor and the media, knew he wasn't capable of being president, and he wasn't. And now look what he's done to our country. With millions of people coming across our border, totally unchecked and unvetted, many from prisons, mental institutions, and record numbers of terrorists, we will suffer greatly because of his presidency, but we will remedy the damage he has done very quickly. Make America great again. And that was Trump's immediate response to Kamala Harris becoming the nominee and Joe Biden dropping out. Again, Kamala Harris is not formally there. And then, of course, over the course of the day, he continued to push on this. Well, Crooked Joe just got knocked out, so now I'll have to do it a fourth time. And then he says, Crooked Joe is the worst president by far in the history of our nation. Whoever the left puts up now will just be more of the same. Make America great again. Does anyone really believe Crooked Joe had COVID? No, he wanted to get out ever since June 27th, the night of the debate, where he was completely obliterated. That was the big moment in Joe Biden's demise. I mean, again, that's kind of true. I mean, that it also happens to be pretty rich, coming from the we love democracy. Democracy must never be disobeyed. For the party elite to oust Joe Biden. Like, that's kind of funny. It's a little funny. They're constantly talking about coups, the overthrowing of the will of the people. Well, maybe the people, by polling, don't like Joe Biden at this point, but they certainly liked him enough when they were voting for him in the primaries, and I was under the impression that there was, in fact, a primary process. Apparently, that is no longer. Now, Republicans, for their parts, are going to continue to push more and more and more for Joe Biden not just to step out of the nominee position, but to step out of the presidency entirely, which they should. We are now in extraordinarily dangerous waters. Again, we have a president who is not sentient. He's not running for re-election. He's a lame duck. He has no support. And he is going to be in charge of the country until at least January, unless Kamala Harris does something about that. So serious pressure should be put on Kamala Harris. She should be asked, do you think that Joe Biden is mentally well? Do you think Joe Biden is mentally well? That's a live question, not because Joe Biden's the nominee, but because Joe Biden's the president. And the person responsible for invoking the 25th Amendment would be, wait for it, Kamala Harris. The number one question she should be asked over and over and over again, aside from obviously all of her policies and her failures at the border, the number one question is your boss fit to be president today? She should be forced to answer that, because if the answer is no, she actually does have the capacity to stop this entire charade. And if the answer is yes, then she's lying. And we know that that's the case. We know that that's the truth. That is going to be a very telling point with regard to Nancy Pelosi. Again, on the other side of the aisle, the system has changed a little bit with regard to Donald Trump. I think that what Democrats are thinking with this election is we get rid of Biden and everybody will come back to us. We get rid of Biden and now we are not going to really need to run anything. We'll just shout Trump from the rooftops and that will have the desired effect. I don't think that that's true for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is that Donald Trump is actually now presenting an incredibly moderate face in the middle of this race. And number two, the permission structure for normies, for normal people to say they are voting for Donald Trump has already been created, and you can't undo that. So again, the going theory, as I've said many, many times, of this campaign, whoever this campaign is a referendum on is going to lose. So for a while it was Biden. And now the Democratic theory is we get rid of Biden and it'll go back to being Trump. It's not quite that simple. And it's not quite that simple for two specific reasons. One, Donald Trump is now acting like a moderate. He's acting like a pretty sane moderate, actually. Yeah, he's got his foibles. Yeah, he says some crazy stuff. But in general, his campaign is acting very, very sane and very moderate right now. And two, a permission structure, thanks to the last several months, has been set up where normies can now say a thing they never said out loud in 2016 or in 2020. I'm voting for Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump is interesting. And you're seeing this particularly in tech land. You already saw Elon Musk come out and say that he is going to drop $45 million a month into the Trump campaign. Over the weekend, Mark Zuckerberg, who's the head of Meta, and who certainly is not known for being particularly Trump-friendly, he was doing an interview and he talked about how Trump's response to his shooting was, in his words, badass. Here was Mark Zuckerberg.
I've done some stuff personally in the past. I'm not planning on doing that this time. And that includes, not endorsing either of the candidates. Now, look, there's obviously a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world. The historic events over over the weekend. And on a personal note, it's, seeing Donald Trump get up after getting shot in the face and pump his fist in the air with the American flag is one of the most badass things I've ever seen in my life. But look, I mean, it's, and I think, look, it's, at some level as an American, it's like hard to not get kind of emotional about that spirit and that fight. And I think that's why a lot of people like the guy.
Okay, that is something that Mark Zuckerberg never would have said publicly before. It's something that tech bros wouldn't say publicly before. A permission structure has been created over the past several months in which normal Americans are now allowed to say they like Trump. They'll wear the red hat. They'll say they're voting for Trump. So that is a big difference between 2016 and 2020 and 2024. And again, in 2024, Donald Trump is running a much more meticulous, much more likable to sort of the general voter campaign. So he did a rally over the weekend. And honestly, many of the things he said in this rally are incredibly moderate. So first of all, he was actually self-effacing, which is something you normally don't see from President Trump. He actually mocked his own hair. Here he was over the weekend.
You know, I have to just interject, if you would turn off those cameras, because I don't want this. See the screen up there of me? That's very severe, that comb over. That's a severe sucker. What's with that one? It looks okay from the other side. But that is very severe. I apologize. Man, I looked up there. I said, whoa. Look at that. Wow. That's like a work of art.
Like self-effacing Trump is a new one and much more likable. Okay, Trump also was asked about Project 2025. He was actually on the campaign trail talking about Project 2025. Remember that Kamala Harris's first comment upon getting the Veep call, the Selena Meyer call, that she was going to be the new candidate, she started yelling about Project 2025. And this has become the Democrats' bugaboo as I testified before Congress. Eric Swalwell asked me about Project 2025, and I kept saying, Project 2025 for Democrats, like Peter Pan and Tinkerbell. You just say it over and over and over, and magically your candidate is alive again. Well, Kamala Harris is also trying to do Project 2025. Well, Trump took it head on in the middle of one of his rallies over the weekend. Here he was on Project 2025.
Some on the right, severe right, came up with this Project 25, and I don't even know. I mean, some of them I know who they are, but they're very, very conservative, just like you have. They're sort of the opposite of the radical left, okay? You have the radical left and you have the radical right, and they come up with this, I don't know what the hell it is, it's Project 25. He's involved in Project, and then they read some of the things, and they are extreme. I mean, they're seriously extreme. But I don't know anything about it. I don't want to know anything about it.
Okay, so again, I actually think it's pretty unfair to much of what's in Project 2025, which again, I've read, I'm maybe one of the only people alive who's actually read large chunks of it, but President Trump is obviously attempting to grab that sort of middle mode, right? He's attempting to grab the middle of the political spectrum. I mean, he was doing it all over the place this weekend, right? So he was talking about how the media had been accused by people, including me, by the way, of miscovering the shooting originally. That very early on, they were saying things like, Donald Trump ducks after loud noises in crowd. And I was like, really? Come on. If that were Joe Biden, would they say the same thing? Trump ends up defending the press. That's how moderate Trump is trying to be now.
I want to thank Butler Memorial Hospital in Pennsylvania for the incredible job they did and service they gave, and all of the great citizens of Butler, Pennsylvania, and the surrounding area, and everyone else for the job they did and the love that they showed us all. It was incredible, actually. What a time that was. What a time that was. Nobody's seen anything like it. And hopefully they never will again. And they had cameras blazing. I guess it was different in that way too, because we were right in the middle. All those, see, look at all the news back there, and they were all blazing. They were going. No, they covered it fairly. They couldn't believe what they were saying either. So.
And it's the first time he's ever said anything nice about the press right there. And then over the weekend, Donald Trump took a call from Vladimir Zelensky, right, who is the president of Ukraine. And Zelensky talked to him about the assassination attempt, and Trump then released a statement talking about their very good phone call. Quote, I appreciate President Zelensky for reaching out because I, as your next president of the United States, will bring peace to the world and end the war that has cost so many lives and devastated countless innocent families. Like, that sounds pretty moderate. So again, Donald Trump right now has control of the moderate lane in the election. The Democratic Party, even if they come up with Kamala Harris, even if they unify around her, it looks like chaos over there. This means that Donald Trump does have the upper hand. It does also mean the race has changed. And there's no other way to see it other than that the race has radically, radically changed. Okay, folks, coming up, we'll get into more updates on the Secret Service. Again, it is amazing that the head of the Secret Service has not yet been fired. If you're not a member, become a member today. Use code FIGHT at checkout for 47% off annual membership. Click the link in the description and join us.